I asked my son, I'm like, you want me to make you a t-shirt quilt? No, Mom. I'm like, you don't? He goes, no, I don't really like those and I won't use it. Well, you know he's not in the will anymore, you know that. My earliest memory of a quilt, my grandmother passed away and she lived like 4 houses down from us. And she had some quilts that she had made. And she had some nicer quilts and she had some raggy quilts. And my aunts and uncles went in and grabbed all the good quilts. And what was left, because my dad didn't want to go in there and fight, what was left were I would imagine they were the picnic quilts, you know, the ones that were all kind of worn and torn and threadbare. And I just remember that those are what my dad ended up getting, you know, was the leftover kind of scraps that nobody wanted. So that's my first memory of a quilt. And I have that quilt now. Stressful, because I'm a perfectionist kind of. It's like, oh, those stitches are too long, you know, and then you pull it out. But when I was done, I was very proud of what I had accomplished, you know. I remember the woman who taught me how to quilt. I'm like, I don't know how to sew a straight line. She's like, you don't need to know how to sew a straight line. We help you learn that, you know. So the fact that I didn't know anything to have finished that quilt, you know, was something. Church ladies.
Really?
It was a church group. Yep.
That's cool.
Yep. And it was a group of ladies that were encouraging and supportive and more than happy to share their knowledge and wisdom and experience, you know, and I stuck with it because every week I would go and, you know, you're all working on your own individual projects, but you're chatting about life. And they were a little older than me, so they were going through, you know, they had gone through the things that I was going through with my kids, so I could listen to their wisdom and listen to their advice, and, you know, it would get me through. I've been the retreat ladies here, it's the 20th anniversary of the Rolling Valley Ward quilt group. And I've been a part of that for 19 years. When they first started it, my last child was in kindergarten, so I wasn't free all day yet. So I had to wait, I had to defer my entrance for a year. So I started going when my youngest was in first grade. So 19 years I've been quilting. Yeah, no, we had a woman in our, who joined our guild a little bit later, and she did a lot of quilts for NICU babies. She did a lot of those kind of service quilts. But our guild, per se, didn't really do that. We would make quilts for members that were moving or that were sick, that were going to have surgery, that were going through cancer treatment. You know, I got one myself. So they made a signature quilt for me. You know what that is? You know, every member of the group signed their name and put a little well wish. You know, it's a very special quilt to me.
Very special.
So the woman who started our quilt guilds had certain rules. She was a military wife, so she had certain rules. So if you came in, she was going to teach you how to quilt, and you had to learn how to hand quilt also. So the very first quilt I made was a twin-size bed quilt that I had to quilt, hand quilt, and it took a year. I hated it the whole time, but she made me. I mean, I could have walked away, of course, but I knew that it was an important skill to learn. So my first quilt was a twin for my youngest son that I hand quilted. Yeah, But no, I hadn't, like my mom's not, I don't come from a line of quilters. My mom wasn't a quilter. My mother-in-law was not a quilter. But I always said I wanted to make a quilt before I died. You know, why I said that, I don't know, but I always wanted to. So when the opportunity came along for someone to teach me how to do that, I grabbed it. You know, I've made all my kids' quilts. I've made quilts for other people who have been going through cancer treatment. I made quilts for our bed. Just, you know, my husband is really supportive, and whenever I finish something, he's like, that is awesome, that's perfect, I love it. He lots and lots and lots of positive, you know, feedback, and my kids love the quilts, you know. And that just makes me feel good. And I always tell them, I'm like, if you ever need mom's DNA, there's probably some blood and some of that fabric, you know what I mean? So you can always withdraw that. But you know, I've, like a lot of quilters, have a lot of fabric now that because buying fabric is just as fun as sewing with the fabric. Collecting the fabric is part of the journey, you know what I mean?
There's so much fabric.
So much fabric to be had, and they
Yes.
keep making more and more and more, so you got to keep buying it, you know? So now it's like, I want to leave quilts, not bundles of fabric when I'm no longer here, you know? So that kind of keeps me going. I mean, honestly, sometimes, you know, it's like, all right, well, I got all that. I gotta go do something with it, you know? So. I like piecing the blocks, the basic blocks of a quilt, you know? It's like taking all these little pieces and sewing them together and you create something. Picking fabric is stressful. So I love when kits are put together for me and I'm like, oh, I like that. And I buy it. You know, I'm not creative that way. So I grab a kit, cut up all the fabric and then sew it together. And I like that. So I like that part. What I hate is putting borders on a quilt.
You're not a border gal.
I'll put a border if it's posted, but I don't like it. It's almost like an afterthought to me. Because like the body of the quilt is what I like putting together, and then it's like borders. I don't know why. And then I like quilting. You know, I have a long arm machine, so I like quilting. And I like putting the binding on because it's like the period at the end of the sentence. It's like the final thing. I've got some of my kids that love and want to take any quilt that I make for them. And I've had my son, my oldest son, this was hard to hear. Kind of what we quilters do is we make a t-shirt quilt for kids that are seniors in high school, right? If they have sports or, you know, band or chorus or whatever t-shirts, we take those t-shirts, cut it up, put it in a quilt, and then they take it with them to college. And I asked my son, I'm like, you want me to make you a t-shirt quilt? No, Mom. I'm like, you don't? He goes, no, I don't really like those and I won't use it. Well, you know he's not in the will anymore, you know that. Well, if we're gonna be honest, so I've had a lot of crafts before quilting, and part of what you do is you just buy a bunch of stuff, and then next thing you know, you've got all these things and you kind of feel overwhelmed. And when I started quilting, I remember thinking, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna buy one project and I'm gonna finish it before I move on to the next project. You know, that way I'm not gonna end up with buckets and buckets of fabric that, you know, I'm never gonna get to. So my advice, and then we went to a quilting show, and all the ladies who had been quilting for years before me were just buying stuff because they liked it. And I remember thinking, you can do that? Oh, and then I started doing that, and then I got myself right back to where I used to be with all my crap. So my advice would be finish a project, mostly until you begin, you know, before you buy more stuff for another project. It's not very fun to do that, but that's my practical advice. I do get a lot of joy in making something and giving that to someone I love. My name is Karen Ray, and this is why I quilt.